All right, let's have a quick discovery or rediscovery of how to create this animation, about 10 seconds long animation, and then turn it into a 20-second one as well. But starting from just one single image. And in fact, I have here a stored copy of this image as a brush. Still loading. There it is. So I have just a single brush image, but I zoomed into it quite a bit. And I want to go and start from the very scratch. Let me close a couple of things here. So here's the original image. Actually, that's not even it. Let me go and replace, create a new image here, lose the animation. There you go. So here's the original animation, the original image, right? And I'm going to create a placeholder to create about 4 or 5 variants of that. So I have now created an animation with 5 frames that are duplicates of this, and I want to have actually a few more, a slight variation. So number 2, number 3, 4, and 5 will have slightly different appearance. So one way to do that is to simply pick this up as a custom brush from the brush menu here, pick the whole selection as a custom brush and store it. And then do some sort of scaling, change in the size, enable the preview so you can see it, and then that way you can stamp it right in here. And you got one copy. It's a little bit off. Let's go something like this. Yeah. So we have one image here. Then we can go to the next one. Perhaps we want to flip it, so you can flip the brush image, or we can flip this original image right there in the image container. So let's go flip it horizontal. That will do that, not to the whole animation, just that one image, right? So we have now this original image, we have this one, we have this one. Let's do one where we zoom into this quite a bit. So I'm going to go back to my brush and enable the preview and make it even bigger. Now there's a limit here to go 200%, and maybe I want really much more than that. So I'm going to go to the brush menu and resample it in there and make it twice as big. And so now I have a really big big brush image here, and I can stamp it right down like this, right? Let's go store it. There you go. So now we have a very nice close-up on the mushroom, and then perhaps we need one more on the face, but maybe again back at the original orientation. So let's flip this one back one more time, horizontal, not to the whole animation, and zoom in. Now there's another way to do this zoom or transformation at the image level. You can go to the transform and do all sorts of mischievous things here, including rotation. If you scale it down small, you could also tile it and have a sort of a fancy effect at that level. Let's go do something like this here without the tiling. Transform it to about this. Well, okay, so we go this, and so now we have our 5 images that were all derived from the one original painting or drawing. Now I'm gonna make it a little bit. First of all, I'm gonna store this. I'm lazy, I'm not going to save it to files, but I'm going to store it to disk, which essentially does actually give it a safe place to be. And then I can go and expand the dynamic range to make it a little bit brighter. Maybe I can go and add a little bit of value adjust here for the contrast. No, that's way too much. Let's reset this and do a little bit of brighter or more contrast. Kind of clean up some of the mishaps from the scanner or from the lighting. There you go, and animate that, so that applies to the entire animation. So now we got an interesting sequence of images, and the question now is, after we store this, how do we turn this into a I don't know, 10-second animation? We need 30 frames per second if we want this to be really smooth. We need 300 frames total if we want that to be 10 seconds long of smooth animation. Right now it's very fast, it's only 5 frames. So when I play it, that's no go. I need to get a placeholder for many more frames. Let's go do that. Let's go create animation of 300, but that's not where I do this. What I'm going to do is load, fire off another plugin that's included with this program. If you find it under Filter, All Plugins, Miscellaneous, and look for the Mouth plugin. Right, what the Mouth plugin represents is essentially also known as the exposure sheet. And that's because most of the time what you really use it for is to indicate you know, give me a cartoonish look, and then you load a wave file that has sort of a speech pattern in it, and then you identify the different phonemes of that speech pattern. So you can have the lips take the same shape. Now, I didn't load a wave file, so it's not showing me what the lips look like. It's really meant for you to hand draw that. It's not going to fill it in for you, although there's probably ways to make it so as well. And there's a couple of mouth sets to choose from. And what we'll do though is we'll ignore that, and we'll use just one more feature that's in there. Under the camera, there's a sequence frame, sequence frames with frame painter. So the frame painter, let's launch that. What the frame painter does is it tells you, okay, so you got just a few frames, and I hear you want to make this into a much longer animation. How many frames for this new animation? Well, let's give it 300. Okay, we know that's going to take 10 seconds to play if we actually play it at 30 frames per second. Well, so at that point, we do have now a view here. Let me make it as big as possible, as wide as possible. So you see that we have those 5 images in our current animation, and we have here a placeholder for 300 images in our future animation. Right? So what we'll do is we'll take the first one, for instance, and just paint it right in there. Just drag across that. Right, and then you can click a little bit to the side to go a little bit more, and that tells you, oh, 28, so we're almost a second long on this one. Let's go all the way to number 30 or 31. Who's counting anyway? So then we go to the next frame and say, yep, something like this, and yep, drag it in there. Then we go to perhaps back to this one, or maybe onto this view, right? And say, hey, what's your name? And and then we say this frame here is going to be where the answer comes from Mr. Mush, and we have something like this here. So we essentially fill in different frames. We only have 2, 3, maybe 5 frames to choose from, but we can easily populate the whole animation into a nice sequence here of roughly the dialogue that you want to conduct here, right? And so whenever you go from one frame to the next, or from one sequence to the next, you'll probably have a change in the voice, the dialogue, the other person will speak and say something funny. And then here we may want to go back to the very beginning. And it looks like we actually have a nice little animation of 10 seconds when we really worked with just a few frames. And they were all derived from the one and only image we actually had to begin with. So that's the little magic here about that. So we have now a sequence that the frame painter helped us establish with 300 frames there. And what we'll do is we'll say shoot it, right? This is basically camera action kind of thing. Shoot this, but before we do that, also check this box, wiggle hold. What that does is it will make it wiggle. It will animate, even if it's, it's not moving. These are static characters, the same image over and over again. It might be a bit boring, so let's give it a little bit more of a animated appearance by wiggling it. And you can overdo it too, or you can set the size, the distance of the wiggle motion. I think the default settings are pretty well, but feel free to explore. There's also a retrieve button. I have no idea what that does. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to go shoot it. All right. And so at this time, it's rendering those few frames into those many frames, 300 of those. And as it's doing that, it's also applying the wiggle hold, what was it? Wiggle something. We have a separate filter called wiggle something, and it's basically applying that as well, or something similar to that algorithm to give it a little bit of additional life. It's almost going to look like it's breathing. You'll see that in a second once the animation is completed. So now don't go overboard with how many frames you can do with that, because it's all taking memory, right? It has to fit in memory, has to fit in a 32-bit space addressing space. And so I'm going to go call it done, exit the frame painter, exit the mouth plugin, and now here we have this animation, and check it out. See how it's wiggling? And we have a sequence that takes a few seconds at a time. And you can fill in the blanks now, right? Whatever your dialogue is that you want to convey to that. All right. And then, of course, there's one more thing to do. Well, first of all, store this to disk. This one's now 10 seconds long. And let's say we want this 20 seconds long. We are going to need to time stretch it. So one thing you can do is right-click on the timeline up here and get this menu for the frame editing, or go to the animation and go to frames, same thing, and then you have the time stretch. Now sometimes when things move too fast, you get a little bit of a ghosting or strobing effect, texture noise. So another approach which I like a lot is to use the motion estimation, the motion prediction module right here from the animated collection of filters. And with that, let's see how much we can go in terms of how much memory it's going to take. Do we have enough memory for it? So right now, 300 frames. I'm not sure how big this image is. Let's go to info. It's 683 by 687. Well, first of all, these are odd numbers. I don't like those. I must have cropped it manually or something. So one thing I'm going to do is actually resample that. Resample that to a more reasonable dimension. And reasonable in video means it's a multiple of 2. It's at least an even number. So I'm going to resample it to something, let's say constrain the aspect ratio and say, let's try 640. And see if we can get close to there, 640 by 644. Nobody's going to notice if I cheat here and make it an exact square of 640. Or if I wanted that smaller because it's going to be delivered on the web inside a particular space on my web page, I might say, let's make it 512. And if I know that the place where I need to see it is going to be even smaller in the web page, and I don't want to see the larger version, I might even make it smaller. Right? So I'm going to keep it at 512 by 512. And apply this resample to that, and then at that point I'm ready to do a couple of things to perhaps extend it to twice the duration. Right now we have an animation that lasts 10 seconds, and in a way it would be nice to have more time to speak our sentences, right? Because 1 second is a short time to do this thing and then move over to the next dialogue and the next dialogue. They are a bit too fast here. The wiggling motion is also a little bit too jittery. Looks like I had 5 cups of coffee this morning. So I'm going to go to, first of all, store this animation. That's really a habit you need to have. Make it often, save it often, or store it often to disk. And there's a video I posted earlier that shows how to recover those in case you run out of memory, your battery runs out of power, or you are on external power and there's a power outage or something like that, or there's a crash and the program dies. You can recover those stored animations. You can. And so one thing I'm going to do now is go back to filter, animated, motion prediction module. Oh no, I wanted to first see how big can I make this animation, right? 300 frames, can I push it to 600? Can I push it to 900 at this current dimension, 512 by 512 squared? Well, let's simply go to create and see how far I can push this. If I go to 1000, it tells you how much memory it needs, right? Roughly 750 megabytes. We're probably good. 2000, 1500, makes sense. All right, 3000. It's going red. That's a warning sign here. And the numbers are possibly totally misleading here. The fact that it goes red is what you want to look for. And then perhaps go back down to see, well, can I do 2400? Yep, that still fits. It's a 32-bit app, so you can allocate memory to the tune of about 2 gigabytes. And beyond that, you're going to be running into troubles. But I don't need that much. I just need about, 300 first. I'm going to go to 600. I want to make it last about 20 seconds total. Now, I'm probably going to delete one frame at the beginning because using the motion estimation, it's wrapping the last frame back to the first. So I'm going to go really give it 601. And that gives me an idea, 450 megabytes still. Now, I'm not going to create that now. I'm going to tell it to actually just double up, and it may end up not being exactly 600. We can use a time stretch to make it so if we need to be exactly at 600. With the motion estimation, it's an approximation. It's a slightly different algorithm. So if we do the motion prediction module here, do a dry run first, and uncheck the scan for drop frames. We know we don't have any drop frames in this one, and give it twice that many. The tween is going to do twice. That means we probably go from 300 to almost 600. Let's give it a go. There, 597. All right, and so let's go OK. That looks decent. Not too many distortion effects, and since it's wiggling, if there's any distortion effects, it's just distorting the wiggle, and it's not going to look very distracting anyway. So let's go uncheck the dry run and make it so. And at that point, we are committing this new animation. We're rendering it into a separate buffer, and then we copying it to the new. And so at that point, almost done. 200, 300 there. Now, remember, the first frame is the same as the last frame. It's a copy of the last frame. I don't know exactly how that happens, but it happens. So the very first frame you want to delete, otherwise you get this odd jump right there from the beginning. So delete that first frame, and now you have 595 frames. And of course we'll store this one. And again, if we are picky and we need this to be exactly 299 or 599 frames, or exactly 300 frames, let's just make it so. Let's right click on this timeline and use this time the time stretch with frame blending, and say, oh, let's make it 600. It's 600 frame total, so it will actually scale to the new number of frames, and some of them will be blended between two neighboring frames. Okay, that, and I don't think I can tell the difference, but there will be 1 or 2 frames that are duplicated or stretched into filling the additional time. Now we have exactly 600 frames. Nice little short animation that started from just this one image created by Michael McDonald. Alright, thank you very much for watching this quick tutorial. I hope this will give you some ideas on how you can make use of the frame painter to create funny little animations. All you need is an idea of what to say after you've created the visuals.